Hi, this is Chatterboxing. I'm Sean, and I want to make a quick video about Anthony Joshua, Wladimir Klitschko. They had a press conference yesterday in Germany. The first thing I want to talk about, the first thing that surprised me, is how many people are writing off Wladimir Klitschko in this fight. I've heard a lot of people talking as if he's well past it, he's washed up, he can't pull the trigger anymore. Almost as if this is going to be an easy fight for Joshua. I mean, this is Joshua's 19th fight. He's never gone 12 rounds before. He's never fought anyone remotely close to the level of Wladimir Klitschko, and he hasn't really learned that much. I mean, yeah, he might have learned a bit in the gym. He's obviously very well schooled. He's a student of the game as well, and he's going to be picking up whatever he can. But in terms of fights, he hasn't really had to learn that much. Now, people are talking about Wladimir Klitschko's last fight, saying, "Oh, he looked terrible. He couldn't pull the trigger, and this, that, and the other." Well, as everybody in boxing always says, styles make fights. Tyson Fury, I said before the fight, I thought he was going to beat Wladimir Klitschko. I think he's massively underrated, and I also think that the style that he has was going to be very difficult for Wladimir Klitschko to overcome. Now, Wladimir Klitschko, the way he likes to fight, the way he's been successful, everything comes off the jab. So fighting somebody like Tyson Fury, somebody who's taller than him, who has longer reach, who has very good head movement, very good upper body movement, quick feet. People underestimate he's very quick. He's just because he's big, and like sometimes people might think, I don't understand how people say that he's not a good mover either. I mean, the balance that Fury is amazing for someone that size. Coming in, coming out, he can move in, punching you, back punching on the move, going forwards, going backwards, switches, stances, great feints. So Wladimir Klitschko never really found his range. He couldn't really land a jab. So if he couldn't land that jab, he couldn't really land the other punch. I mean, the other punches, like the big right hand and the left hook, I mean, let's be honest, those are his big weapons. So I see this being very different with Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua, as good as he is, and he definitely has a lot of attributes that Fury doesn't have, but I can't see it being that difficult for Wladimir Klitschko to land a jab on him. I mean, he's good. He kind of subtly moves his head quite well. Like he can slip quite well, slip a jab, and he does have pretty good reflexes. But it's not the same thing. Someone like Wladimir Klitschko, he can be quite hesitant to throw it. If you've got somebody like Fury, who's just kind of constantly moving his head around, dipping his shoulders, switching stances, coming in feinting, changing the angles up, that completely threw him off his game. Now, anyone who's done any kind of boxing, martial arts, sparring. I'm not talking about like obviously you can have a sort of fight in the street. People don't do that. But anyone who's had any kind of training of how to avoid a punch, and you fight against someone like that, you know that you don't just throw punches aimlessly. You have to set it up. Wladimir Klitschko is very, very methodical. So against somebody like Fury, the fact that he could have landed that jab because of the attributes that Fury had made everything else very difficult for him. So you can't just assume that now the same thing is going to apply against somebody with a completely different style. Now, I'm not saying that Anthony Joshua isn't going to be able to avoid some jabs, but he's not really going to put him off throwing them. And if he does start landing them, then everything else is going to potentially come from there. Now, I'm not saying that I don't think Anthony Joshua is going to win. This isn't like a final prediction. I see it as a very difficult one to pick, really. I'm slightly leaning towards Joshua. Part of that maybe like sort of thinking with my heart a bit more than my head, but I do see it as a 50-50, and I can see both of them. But I think people need to understand that this is a completely different fight stylistically. So if Wladimir Klitschko is able to land his jab, which I think he will, then that just opens everything else up for him. You also have to bear in mind that when Tyson Fury fought Wladimir Klitschko, he was much more experienced than Anthony Joshua is. He'd had about 25 fights maybe, so it's a lot more. He'd also had to pull out a few decisions, and he had to come up against adversity and overcome it. Anthony Joshua has basically just been blasting through people, which is fine. He can do that, but he hasn't had to develop that much ring craft because of that, and that could be a factor in this. I mean, he's never, that I can really had to win a round or even think about winning a round. At least it didn't look like that to me. He's just going in there to do a demolition job on you, which is fine. That's obviously, like, we like to see that, but that could be a factor when you're fighting somebody like Klitschko, who is very, very experienced, been in there with some big punches, people like Samuel Peter, David Hay, I mean, loads of big punchers over the years. And he's, been there, done it, he's seen it all. So he's very good at not getting knocked out, which is what Anthony Joshua is very good at doing. So, it really is, to use a cliche, a crossroads fight. And I can see Anthony Joshua overpowering him, just having no respect from going for it. I can definitely see that happening, but I can also see the experience that Klitschko has, and the lack of experience that Anthony Joshua has, plus the style. I mean, he's quite stiff, Anthony Joshua. As I said, Tyson Fury is a moving target, and he's long as well, and he's switching stances. So you never really know where that head's going to be. It's just constantly moving around, changing, coming to you from different angles. That completely threw off Wladimir Klitschko. Anthony Joshua, upright, solid. That's the kind of target that he likes, and that's the kind of target he excels in. Now, whether that's going to be enough, I don't know. As I say, this isn't a final prediction, but I just wanted to make that point. Also, I think the mental aspect. Now, firstly, a lot of people have been talking about this. I saw from the video yesterday where Wladimir Klitschko was like telling him, "Put your fists up," and all this. And there's a comment underneath it, someone saying, he's just telling Joshua what to do, and Joshua's doing it. He looks a bit nervous, and he's kind of being psychologically dominated. Now, whether that has an effect on Anthony Joshua or not, I don't know. Personally, my instinct is that it won't. I don't think it will. I think Anthony Joshua has had a lot of pressure on him from the beginning. I think he's come through. Obviously, he was the Olympic gold medalist in London. He was always very, very popular with the British public, and he was always there, high-profile fights. Headlining shows after about five or six fights. Big pressure, big expectation, pay-per-view fights for like British title fights. Do you know what I mean? Eddie Hearn blowing smoke up his ass, telling us that he's like, the greatest thing since, the greatest boxer since Muhammad Ali, or, literally just massive pressure. He's managed to deal with that, and he's stayed very composed. So I do like that about him. I think he's very measured in his approach. He understands the opportunity that he has, and I don't think he gets carried away. You never hear him like really bigging himself up too much. If anything, he plays it down. He's the kind of person who really keeps his feet on the ground, works hard, and I don't see it affecting him, to be honest. I think that's just his style. I don't think he's going to go in there and need to be like throwing his weight around, being aggressive. I don't think that's what he's like. So if he did do that, then that would be a bit weird. It'd be like almost like it's a bit fake. So I don't really see a problem with that. What I do think, however, is that it's definitely to the benefit of Wladimir Klitschko, the personality that Anthony Joshua has. Because, everybody says it's not like some new theory that he's a control freak. He likes to have everything his own way. He likes to know what's happening, and he likes to be, in charge of everything. So, again, compared to the Tyson Fury fight, he was quite anxious. Every time they had to meet Tyson Fury, he didn't know what was going to happen. He couldn't control him. He saw Fury as kind of quite uncouth, bit of a hooligan, basically, bit of a lout, just do what he wants. And he couldn't really handle that. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what Fury was going to do. 1 minute he's in there, like in his face, getting all aggressive. Next minute he's like, "All right, Vlad, how you doing, mate?" And he just didn't know what was going on. So I think that would affect his preparation. I think that would make him quite anxious. I also think the linguistic element is being overlooked as well. You've got somebody like Tyson Fury turning up to the press conference, and he's just there, like mugging you off, quick talking, taking a piss out of you the whole time. English is not his first language. It's not even his second language, as far as I'm aware. I think German probably is. So now people might see Wladimir Klitschko making his speeches, doing interviews, and like kind of quite, measured about saying what he says, and think, "Oh, he speaks English, fine, no problem." It's not the same thing. I mean, if anybody, I speak another language myself, So I can understand like what it's like. If you don't, it might be difficult for you to understand. But there's a big difference between saying what you want to say and kind of knowing what you want to say, and then sort of going back and forth like that, then having to think, boom, quickly when someone's like taking the piss out of you, and it's like an argument, and you're a bit stressed, and you have to keep coming back. That is a different kettle of fish, and that is something that is much harder to do, and I think that's something that would make him feel very uncomfortable as well in that environment in front of loads of people. When he came to England, Fury was just kind of taking the piss out of him. The journalists were asking him some quite hard questions about the ring when he tried to cheat. So he just didn't really need that. He wasn't very comfortable. That affects your preparation, I think. That makes him a bit more nervous, expends a bit of mental energy, and I think that had an effect. So I think the fact that this whole psychological thing that people are talking about, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal for Anthony Joshua. We've never seen him fight in front of 90,000 people. Do you know what I mean? Against someone of this caliber. So maybe it could. I don't think it will, but I definitely think it's good for Wladimir Klitschko. So I think mentally you're going to see a much better Wladimir Klitschko. I think he's going to be much more focused. You also have to take into account the fact that how much he wants this. Now, I mean, I saw an interview with Carl Froch, and he was saying that when he fought George Groves, he was thinking this could be his last fight. This was at Wembley Stadium, obviously, as well. And he was so up for it. He really wanted to go out with a bang, and he was just driven, focused. Now, for me, Froch and Klitschko are quite similar in that sense. Very, very professional, very, very methodical in their approach. No stone left unturned. Obsessed. I think Wladimir Klitschko used the word obsessed. Very, very driven man who's going to be 100% motivated, a man on a mission for this. So I think with the Fury, he obviously knew that Tyson Fury was a threat. That's why he had to fight so many eliminators, and he was in no rush to fight him. He had to get mandatory status, etc. But it's not quite the same as now. I think he really is thinking this is to finish off my career with a bang, and I do not want to go out, getting knocked out. I want to basically turn Anthony Joshua into the next George Groves. So I think you have to bear that in mind, just that mental side for Klitschko, and also just the potential lack of experience. People, not just the lack of experience, the styles make fights element of this. So I think people don't really give Fury the respect that he deserves for that victory. And I think they're kind of now trying to make out as if Wladimir Klitschko is completely shot, which I think is just false. He may not be physically as good as he used to be, but he's still very good. So I don't want to hear any excuses. If Anthony Joshua does win this fight, he deserves massive respect. It's not like just some old past it has been who's been knocked out a few times recently out, but that's not the case. He lost to an unbeaten fighter who's a lot more experienced, had different dimensions, had a different style. So if Anthony Joshua can pull this off, this is a very, very big win, and he deserves massive credit for it. Wladimir Klitschko as well definitely deserves it. If he wins this, massive credit for him too. I mean, I'll make a prediction a bit nearer the time, but yeah, hats off as well to Wladimir Klitschko. I've criticised him in the past, but for him to come to London to take on someone like Anthony Joshua with that momentum, I've got to give him credit. I think that because when I'm talking about the psychology of him in preparation, I'm hoping that will change when he gets into the ring and he's in there against Anthony Joshua, 90,000 people against him. That energy, Anthony Joshua just going for it. Hopefully, then that will start to affect it. But who knows? I can see this being a very, very I see this a very difficult one to pick at this time. So yeah, I just wanted to make those couple of points. Let me know if you disagree with what I'm saying. I'll be interested to hear why, because I don't see Wladimir Klitschko as a completely shot fighter at all, and I think he's going to be really up for this. So yeah, that's all I've got to say for now. Thank you very much for watching.